The Western world started getting interested in all these concepts of meditation, blah, 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 only in the 60s. You know, they were not, they were very skeptical about the idea of mind. You know, it's very funny that when you objectively study the history of the Western world, mind is something they started understanding only very recently. You know, really, I'm not joking. It's funny that a human society didn't go deep into the concept of the mind. So in the 60s, 50s and 60s, they were trying to enhance education in Berkeley, you know, in California. So they were trying to understand, can meditation enhance learning processes? You know, they were earlier making experiments with dogs. You remember, I think you know, Ivan Pavlov in Russia. He was measuring the dog and the digestive system and the saliva and all this kind of stuff. And he was talking about conditioning, you know, operant conditioning. And then after, of course, then came Thorndike, and then he was also into studying all these things. And then B.F. Skinner, another American scholar, was studying the influence of data into the, you know, into the pigeons. He was experimenting with pigeons, and he was thinking, how does it work with the learning skills of the pigeon? Yeah, and then it's called classical conditioning and blah blah blah. So this was how they were slowly coming to understand, doing studies on the mind, you know, and then it was very new branch of study. So how to enhance learning was the preoccupation of the students in Berkeley University in California. So there was two very important reasons for this research. One is, of course, enhancing learning for students, and the other is for military purposes. You know, they were trying to enhance the learning habits and skills of the military so that they can quickly train military officials. So this was the basic interest, and in the 60s you could see, like, you know, 2000, anywhere from 2000 onwards, number of people participating in these exercises in the campus in Berkeley. Yeah, and they were meditating, and they were going on experimenting with their learning skills and the memory skills and all this kind of stuff. And then after this, there were these guys are very famous and prominent scholars. One is called Claudio Nerano, you know, C-L-A-U-D-I-O, Claudio, and R-A-J-N-A-N-A, Claudio Nerano. He is from Chile. He just passed away last year. You know, he is no more. July last year he died. And then his partner, Dr. Robert Ornstein, you know, Robert and Ornstein, O-R-N-S-T-E-I-N, Robert Ornstein, and he was writing this book together. The book is called The Psychology of Meditation, yeah? And in this book, they are exploring meditation, and each scholar, you know, Claudio Nerano was looking at what he calls the social aspects of meditation. And Robert Ornstein was working on the psychological aspect of meditation. It's a little book, only about, I think, 195 pages or 200 pages. You might find it somewhere, you know. I don't think it is translated into Mandarin. I don't think so. But anyway, so this was early means 60s. You know, 65, 68, and the book was published, and the experiments were done. So Claudio Nerano was looking at various systems of meditation. Yeah, you know, he was looking at kung fu, karate, and their skills in meditation. And then yogis and their skills in meditation, Taoists and Tantrics and their ability to meditate. He was looking at different systems, the Buddhist system, even as far as Turkey, the Sufis who dance in circles, and they were looking at all these things seriously and measuring using electrodes in the head. They put these wires and they were checking the waves, the electromagnetic records to understand the waves in meditation. How meditation affects the brain waves or the brain areas. So this was going on, and Claudio Mirano was looking at these different systems, and he came to conclusion, as I was saying even yesterday, that whatever your system is, eventually it is read by your brain. Your interpretation comes from the brain. And because the brain interprets it, it eventually ends up as the same, according to Claudio Mirano. Yeah? And it's also true to a very large extent. If you look at meditation all over the world, in the classical or the ancient systems like Taoism or Buddhism, they're very similar in their structures and even their ideologies. So when you're looking at the Claudio Mirano, he concluded that everything is read by the brain the same way. So even if you are like like archery, you are shooting an arrow and you're focusing and meditating to shoot this arrow. Still, it is the same as a Shaolin Kung Fu master who is very active, and the brain works the same way. And if you are a yogi sitting very quietly on the floor, it's the same thing. The mind understands it as the same activity. So then with this information, then Robert Ornstein was looking at the psychological nature and interpretations in more detail. Yeah. So the book is actually like 195 pages divided into two. It's a very small book, two books in one. So this scientific analysis of meditation, which is talked about in this book, The Psychology of Meditation, was the first attempt in the Western world to really try and understand meditation. So next, then many years went through, and then as time went by, it is only in the, I think, 80s. There was another book on meditation. Can you believe this? If you look at books on meditation in China, it is the Yellow Emperor's Classic. It's like 2,000 years old or something like this. In India, it is like that, 2,000 years old, with the Buddha and blah, blah, blah. But in the Western world, it's only like 60s. So the title of the book is called Relaxation Response. Yeah? And it was written by a doctor of medicine called Herbert Benson. Yeah? Herbert, H-E-R-B-E-R-T, and Benson, B-E-N-S-O-N. And this will be, I talk about all these guys because so you can, in your free time, explore more into the world of meditation, into all these things, and actually understand more than what I'm talking. I put the foundation for you to explore. Yeah? So that's why I say all these things. So coming back to Herbert Benson. Herbert Benson was writing at a time when diseases were very costly, prevalent in America. The government has to provide health, and health is an expensive affair in the modern world, especially in America. Many countries health is free. Even India is almost free. They're charging maybe 50 cents and sending out of the government hospitals, and as a contribution. So in America, it's insurance, blah, 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 so it's very expensive affair. So at that time, a lot of people were dying out of heart failures, heart issues. So, before Herbert Benson, people thought that the heart was clogged by fat, and that's how they get heart issues or heart diseases. But Herbert Benson was studying on a lot of patients, and he was analyzing all these things. Yeah. So this man went for a holiday to India and Tibet. So in the process, he met these Tibetan monks. The monks were meditating in the caves, high up in the mountain. So he was following them, and what he was noticing was these monks were just wearing very thin cotton fabric cloth. And then when they went up into the cave, they were sweating, and there in the cave, when they sat for their Tumo practice or the meditation, the Tumo is the Tibetan version of the Kundalini meditation. Yeah, in India it is called Kundalini, in Tibet it is called Tumo. And so when they were meditating, the sweat started steaming, according to Dr. Herbert Benson. Yeah, and the sweat became steam, and then it started popping, like pop, pop. And he was like, wow, this is really interesting. So, but he couldn't stay there long enough because he didn't have much of, these jackets and temperature protection, like a thermal underwear or something like that. So he decided to go back to US and come the next holiday with huge cameras and like 5 layers of clothes to keep himself warm. And he followed these monks again, and he studied these monks, what was going on and blah, blah, blah. And then he went back to the US. And he was checking these heart conditions of the monks and the people with the heart diseases, and he decided to introduce meditation to these patients. And to his surprise, people who meditated recovered from the heart issues very efficiently. What he saw in people with heart problems was that their arteries were very rigid, stiff. You know what I mean? It loses the flexibility. And then because it lost the flexibility, and when there are like moments of excitement, or sadness, and the emotions change, and the blood pressure changes, and then it affects these stiff arteries. It sometimes bursts, and that is how they get heart attacks and all this kind of stuff. So he was studying, before this, people thought that it was fat clogging the heart. Before this, truly, this was medical change in the Western world as well, the idea of meditation. So when Benson was studying this, then he put them into simple meditation. You just sit there, and then you say Om, 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 or anything, Shrim, 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 Krim, 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 anything. And that form of meditation was introduced to the Western world by an Indian famous guru. This guru was so famous. Guys like Beatles, musicians, Bob Marley, all of them were visiting him, learning from him, blah, 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 blah. So this man gave them you meditate for like 20 minutes or quietly, don't make too much noise. And these changed the condition of the arteries, until this, science couldn't understand, because before they used drugs, they used drugs to make the arteries free of the clogging, but the drugs didn't make the artery walls flexible or supple. Yeah, it didn't make it at all. So then with meditation, he found that these arteries could regain, the lost suppleness, the lost flexibility. They got it back. So that was a big surprising thing for, the Dr. Herbert Benson is a scholar in Mount Sinai. I mean, Mount Sinai is like, I don't know how to say, because in China, I don't know which is the medical institute and research center. In Mount Sinai is the biggest research and most respected research center in the United States. So to him, this was like a shocking thing, because drugs never worked. Drugs couldn't regain the flexibility. Meditation could regain the flexibility. So he was preoccupied with this concept, like why, how it works, blah, 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 blah. So then he came up with a very nice explanation, The explanation is, of course, evolution, when you were, with the dinosaur, and then you face the dinosaur, and then, you get a shock, and then the heart rate starts pumping, your hormones start pouring in, oxygenation takes place, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's not go into the details of that now. This concept he called the fight or flight response. Yeah? This word was created earlier in the 1800s by another scholar, or 1900s by another scholar. Walter some canon, his name, I forgot. So the name was introduced by him, but the actual concept was studied by Herbert Benson. And so what Benson is saying that in the past, in the jungle, when you were, confronted by a tiger, you freeze, you really get frightened. Either you have to survive and run, or you fight. But in the modern times, you don't have this environment anymore. Because say you're having an issue in the office space. Your boss is saying something or something, and you feel stressed out. Now you cannot run away from the office. You are still holding on to the stress, hormones. And your heartbeat is pumping, blah, 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 but you have no chance to escape this emotion and these conditions. So you cannot really run away from the situation. Or you cannot fight your boss physically. There's no chance of actually doing physical activity. So the stress remains in ourselves. Similarly, if you have a bad time with your partner in life, also you cannot run away, you cannot do that. So what Benson was saying, like, this is an accumulated problem. And so stress, he says stress is the biggest problem. 60% of people's health problems in the United States are stress. And then he keeps on saying, like, on the longer time period, it becomes hypertension. Hypertension is, say the arteriosclerosis is a result of the hypertension, because it is there, but you don't realize it is there. Stress at least is something that you realize immediately. I don't like the situation, I don't like the condition, I want to walk away, or something like this. But hypertension is within yourself, deep within yourself. So this is what Dr. Benson was saying is affecting the health of many, many people. So he was talking about health. Earlier, they were talking about learning, and then mental health, and then physical health. So finally, America became very, very interested in meditation because of all these kind of researchers. They finally started convince themselves. America needs convincing. All this for me is just organizing different pixels. For me, as a tantric, I laugh. I don't need to be convinced. If I want to do something, I do, or I don't do, and I understand very well in different cultures. But never mind. Coming back to this convincing called science, they convinced themselves and they were looking into this very seriously. But what happened was that these are all clinical studies, but there was no actual ways to meditate, except that Om, 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 or Ching, Ching, Ching. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi meditate for 1 hour every day. These guys meditate for 20 minutes. According to Benson, if you meditate for 20 minutes, it actually alleviates your hypertension and your stress, and your health is better. So then, this period of time, there were others who were studying meditation more seriously. And these guys were the Vipassana guys. So in the Vipassana, there was like a famous Vipassana meditator called Joseph Goldstein. Yeah? And Joseph Goldstein was teaching Vipassana in New York. And then you have a psychologist and feminist from New York called Sharon Salzberg. Yeah? Sharon Salzberg was also, they're all alive. She was teaching Vipassana meditation in New York as well. And then there is another very famous person called Jack Confield. And he's a very famous Vipassana teacher in California, But they were always together. These three were always together, and they formed the centers for meditation in California, in New York, and all that. And these three guys, they studied in Thailand, they studied in Myanmar or Burma, and then they studied in India. And there was a very famous teacher of Vipassana meditation called Goenka. So Goenka was an Indian man born in Burma or Myanmar, and he was practicing Buddhism. And he taught a system of traditional Myanmar Vipassana in all over the world, actually. He first started teaching in Myanmar, then he was taken to India, then from India he went to many other countries, blah, blah, blah. We'll go into Goenka Ji later. And then you have, so like all these guys were teaching how to meditate, yeah? From the scientific blah, blah, blah to how to do it. So the word Vipassana is a Pali word. Pali is a language, a Buddhist language of the old times. So Vipassana means, usually they translate as pure insight, but I translate it as pure realization. Yeah, pure reflection, pure realization. You realize from a very deep self, your own self in the deepest aspect. So it's called Vipassana. It can be read a few ways. And Goenka Ji's Vipassana was a little bit like he was teaching prisoners and all these places, and he was teaching people to meditate for, say, 8 hours a day. But the other group, there is another group called the Mahasi. It's a place in Myanmar called Mahasi, and it's called Mahasi Sayadaw. The chief of the system is a Sayadaw, like a monk. And that system is what Goldstein, Salzberg, and Jack Confield was teaching in the US. There, they meditate for 1 hour, they sit and meditate for 1 hour, then they walk for 1 more hour, and then they sit again for 1 hour. It's a little bit different in the sense. They're more complicated, but I'll just introduce to you guys today, because it's called karma meditation. It's a little bit different from Goenka's meditation. But what is happening around the world is the same.